Alright everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Surrounded by Bourbon with me, Phil Crawford, aka Causeway Whiskey. This is episode 38 and today we are looking at the Chattanooga, that was easy for me to say, Chattanooga whiskey. This is a Tennessee high malt straight bourbon whiskey and this is the Cask 111 release. So before I get into the whiskey itself, I'm probably going to show my age here, but the first thing that comes to mind when I hear the word Chattanooga is the old Glenn Miller song Chattanooga Choo Choo. I don't even know why that stuck in the back of my mind. It's just weird, the things that stick in your head, but I don't know, they used to show all those old like war movies and different things back during my summer holidays whenever I was a kid, and yeah, I don't know why that just stuck in my head. There you go. Anyway, apart from Mr. Miller, Chattanooga was famous for being the home of the first Coca-Cola bottling company that was founded in 1899, and they had exclusive rights to bottle the drink of Coca-Cola throughout most of the US. Also interestingly though, for whiskey fans, Chattanooga was also a bit of a distillation capital in the US, because in the late 1800s it actually had over 30 distilleries there. However, the times changed fairly rapidly, and in 1909 Tennessee itself introduced its own prohibition a full 10 years before the national prohibition hit America, and so by 1915 all of Chattanooga's distilleries had closed down. Now, between 1937 and 2009, obviously after Prohibition had ended, Tennessee repealed state prohibition, but only for 3 of its counties, Lincoln County, Moore County, and Coffee County. But then after the storm of the 2008 financial crash, Tennessee lawmakers then voted to allow spirit production again in a further 41 counties. However, the county that Chattanooga is situated in, Hamilton County, was excluded from that. Step in 2 fine gentlemen, Tim Pearson and Joe Ledbetter, who would form the Chattanooga Whiskey Company in November 2011. They lobbied for a change in the state law and were finally successful in May 2013. By September 2014 then they actually began construction on their first distillery in downtown Chattanooga. I believe that is the experimental distillery that they have, because they also have a second distillery in the riverfront, which is a much bigger plant and can produce about 50 to 60 barrels of whiskey a day. So by November 2015, the Chattanooga Whiskey Company had released its first unaged whiskey, which was the first whiskey produced in Chattanooga for over 100 years. And then by 2019, they had released what are now their signature releases or expressions, the 91 proof and then the Cask 111. So, what is in this, I think, rather fine looking bottle? So the bottle states that this is a high malt Tennessee straight bourbon whiskey. So the mash bill, according to the bottle, the mash bill is yellow corn, malted rye, there is caramel malted barley and also honey malted barley. Now, according to my online research, it is 75% corn and then a combination of the malted rye, caramel and honey malted barley, making up the further 25% of the mash bill. Fermentation time is a full 7 days, so by that point you're going to have a fairly funky new make, or a fairly funky wash I should say, that you're going to distill. This is, I think, quite rightly called, well, they don't even advertise that it's small batch, but it could be quite rightly called small batch because each batch of the Cask 111 is only made up of 6 to 10 barrels, and they represent a single batch and distillation run. And those barrels are 53-gallon barrels, and it's a combination of toasted barrels and then charred virgin oak barrels. Interestingly, the entry proof could be between 113 to 117 proof, which means, you know, by the time this gets into the bottle, they haven't really had to do much to bring the proof down to 111. And then I think the Tennessee climate, you know, obviously can be quite hot in the summer, but also gets pretty cold in the winter. So maybe the proof does rise quite dramatically in those summers. I would need to do a bit more research on that. But anyway, yeah, very interesting that it is such small quantities that make up each individual batch. This is batch number, you know what, I can't even read this now because I'm starting to need glasses, guys. 25D23R, I think it is, from barrel lot 22, oh, who knows. Anyway, I need to get glasses, guys. So anyway, that is what is in the bottle. Let us see how it tastes and see whether it is, oh, and before we actually get onto that, sorry, price and proof. So first of all, proof. So it's 111 proof or 55.5% ABV. These videos are getting worse, aren't they? I don't know, I need to prepare more. Price. This is $40 at Total Wine. That equates to £29 or 34 euros. So this is not expensive stuff. And the website also said it is aged. I mean, it's a straight whiskey, so it has to be aged at least 2 years. So there is no age statement, but the website does say that it is aged more than 2 years. So without further ado, let us get into the nose. So the first thing about the nose is that it is the spicy rye notes that just punch you in the face straight away. You're getting clove, you're getting cinnamon, you're getting citrus like lemon zest, and then maybe like a bit of stewed pears that are studded with the cloves and then dusted with that cinnamon. After that, then you start getting some caramel. There's like Hubba Bubba chewing gum, some vanilla custard. Also quite a distinct note of cherry cola. There is a touch of ethanol in here, but nothing that is off-putting. And also some almond brittle too. And I just realized I'm going to put water in this because it is high proof, so please excuse me as I shift around here for a second and get my implements. It just shows you the amateur nature of these videos. So yeah, pretty interesting nose. So we'll get into the palate before we add water. Well, definitely there's a nice texture to this. Decent viscosity. The legs hold the glass pretty well. But much like the palate, or the nose, the first thing in the palate that hits you is that rye spice. There's really strong clove here, there's cinnamon hops, there's kind of like a wasabi-like heat to this. Take another little sip. So behind the spice then sits a nice sweetness. There's caramel, there's like brown sugar, fudge kind of notes going on. Interestingly, a bit of like toasted coconut. And then that cherry cola again, very prominent. It's a little bit drying towards the end. Like you're starting to definitely get the oak tannins coming through. A bit of like leathery notes as well. Have another little sip and see what I think finish wise. just about medium in length, I would say, by the finish. But again, it's the spice and the oak that kind of dominates things here. That wasabi heat, you're getting the clove, some freshly grated ginger, and then that sort of toasted oak really comes through. But it's still pretty moorish, so, you know, I'm not complaining. So we'll add a little bit of water here. Maybe more than a little bit, actually. Let's see. I mean, at 55.5% or 111 proof, this can more than easily take a bit of water. And whenever you add the water, you can definitely see all those oils just dissipating. Always love that in cask strength whiskey whenever you do that. So we will give that a little bit of time, come back to it. All right, so we have given this some time with the water. You can see with my editing skills, you didn't even notice that the time flew by. Anyway, what do we get with water on the nose? Interestingly, with the water, it becomes a little greener or more herby. So there's like wood sap now. There's like some pan roasted sage leaves. And there's a definite note now of like spent coffee grounds. But you're still getting all that caramel sweetness that was there originally, and those rye spices are still present and correct as well. So let's see what we get in the palate. So definitely the intensity of the spice has been knocked back a little bit. It's still there. You still get that wasabi heat. But now we're getting some like dark chocolate. There's a little kirsch going on. And there's now like a fresh garden mint aspect to it as well. And even with the water, it's not losing structure. I mean, kind of shouldn't at 55%. You know, even if you dial that back to like the high, like 48, you know, kind of 96 proof kind of area, which shouldn't really lose much structure. So that's good. Sign of a pretty well crafted whiskey there. So scores, what would I score this? I am going to score this a 6 out of 10. This is definitely a well-made, solid and interesting bourbon. But even though they say that this is a high malt whiskey, the malt aspect is not very detectable. This is definitely drinks like a high rye bourbon. It's really the rye that is stealing the show here. And that's fine, because I personally love a good rye whiskey, and I love high rye bourbons. I do think that its edge shows a little bit in that there's not a huge amount of complexity or flavor development, and also the fact that it's 75% corn. You know, it is what it is. It's a relatively simple bourbon, but it's well put together, well presented at the cask strength, and it's a very easy sipper. And for $40 a bottle, it's really hard to not like it. Yet again, we have a young American whiskey where if this was, for the most part, a young Irish whiskey, I probably would not be recommending it. Just because Irish whiskey needs, because of the climate and so on, needs a bit longer to mature. But yeah, all in all, a very solid bourbon. Definitely a brand that I will keep my eye on, and will maybe look out some of their experimental releases and different releases that they have, different expressions. So there you go, Chattanooga Whiskey Cask 111. That's your lot. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share the content, leave a little comment. And as always, I hope you find this informative and in some way engaging. And until next time, have a great night. I will see you again. Sláinte. Have a good one.